Hello, everyone. So today, happy to see you again on YouTube. Today, we're going to have a discussion with Jérôme. Jérôme is the founder of Slidor, which is a PowerPoint agency. We'll be able to talk about it a bit more because it's a rather unique business model. I met him because he needed a bit of help with his SEO, so we worked together a little. And so I thought he was a really interesting person based on the few conversations I had with him. So I thought, come on, let's let everyone benefit from it. So are you up for it today, Jérôme, to talk to us about all this and give us some great tips, some great insights on YouTube?
I'm totally up for it. Thanks, Leo, for the invitation. Really happy to be here and to share all this with you.
Okay, great. Well, listen, it's a pleasure then. So look, usually I introduce people a bit and give them a little introduction because they have a model that's a bit easier to understand or a bit more popular than yours. But for once, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your company and what you do specifically. And then we'll dig a bit deeper into all of that because it's a model that's quite interesting and different from what we're used to seeing, I think.
Okay, so I'm Jérôme. I'm the co-founder of Slidor. So it's a presentation design agency, which in our field is also called a PowerPoint agency. So it's a small market, a niche market. And so our job is to create or transform presentations that are generally high stakes for companies. So basically, if you're a company, you're about to raise funds, you have a sales presentation, or you have an important event to prepare for, you'll go through an agency if you want to have a really beautiful presentation, one that has impact or one that will convert. So we're really an agency, a design studio dedicated to one profession, presentations.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm picking up my phone like this and I'm jotting down everything that comes to mind because I have a lot of thoughts popping up. As you speak, more and more ideas come to me. The first question I have is, how did you end up starting a PowerPoint agency? Where did the idea come from? Because I don't know if you were the first one in France. I don't know if you're the biggest one, by the way, whether in France or not. And I don't see, for me, an SEO agency makes sense. It's a common classic model seen everywhere. But you, a PowerPoint agency, how did you decide to launch one?
So it goes back a bit. You have to go back to 2013, so 12 years ago. Basically, I was studying at an engineering school. Then I realized I didn't want to be an engineer. So next, I decided to do a master's degree at a business school. And I did something pretty standard. So I signed for a job. At Amazon, I did a lot of Excel work, which I didn't really enjoy. And with my brother, we had a few ideas and we were looking for one where we might be the most qualified to make it happen, but also an idea where we wouldn't have to put any money into it and where we could quickly see if there was any return. And so I quit my job. And we also chose this niche because at the time we thought actually there was starting to be some interest in web design, but we thought it could also apply to presentations. And we had this idea, but the reality is we weren't the first ones to have it. There were already players in the market offering a value proposition like, we'll save you time when you make slides. You won't have to do it in-house. We'll do it for you. And we tried to set ourselves apart by saying, we really want to bring value and we're going to try to create perhaps the high-end segment of the presentation market. So we think that presentations often carry a lot at stake, so they deserve attention and they can have quite a significant impact. I'll give you an example. You have a sales presentation that you might roll out to a team of salespeople. If you manage to increase your conversion rate even a little with a great presentation, it's important. It's worth investing some budget in it. So the real reason we're getting started is, first of all, we're broke, so we have some preliminary studies to pay back. It's an idea we can implement fairly quickly. I'm passionate about design. Even though I didn't study in that field and my brother has a strong commercial background, we can try this out quickly and we dive right in, telling ourselves with a bit of arrogance that we're going to do better than the players already on the market. We really jumped in overnight and that's how we started.
Are you inspired by the US when you do this? Do you look at the American model when you do this? Because often the US is a bit ahead of us. And I imagine it's a model that must have existed for a long time, forever in the US. And are you following that logic? Or are you looking at a French model? It's a French number. You think to yourself, hey, they do this with low-end products and we could take the market by doing high-end. And there's a segment that's not being addressed. What models do you look at when you launch this company?
That's a very good question. So for me, at that moment, you have to understand that I was just coming out from a master's program, which is HEC, an entrepreneur who swears only by SaaS products and entrepreneurship in San Francisco. And so already
Back in 2012.
2012, yes. It was starting to be pretty cool to be an entrepreneur at that time. And we all started looking toward the United States, towards Silicon Valley at SaaS products because they're examples of marketing. And that's it. It was really the time when we told ourselves we wanted to build scalable companies, which, by the way, we absolutely weren't with a service-based company. But I was looking at all that. And that's actually what inspired me. It was more about product companies. So the PowerPoint presentation market isn't structured. There's a company called Nancy Duarte, founded by Nancy Duarte, that provides some tips on PowerPoint, on content, things like that. But in the end, there really isn't any player we can look to for inspiration. And there's no real inspiration either. That is to say, we see a lot about web design, but we see almost nothing about PowerPoint presentations, at least not about beautiful presentations. So for us, our inspiration at that time was SaaS products, startup marketing for companies that had raised funds, and web design, so sites like awards, etc. And we thought, let's try to bring that to presentations.
Okay, it's funny because you're really starting out with a melting pot that's super interesting. That's really cool, because actually it's a model that's been tried and tested and then worn out over the past 10 years. But you take these inspirations, and actually what you do afterwards with your company, it kind of resembles all of that a little bit each time, but it's actually quite far from what you were doing initially. Yes?
That's true. Actually, we always need some inspiration in design when you want to set a creative direction or an artistic direction. And so for us, it's always been the web because things move very quickly there. That's where you can find new things. So very quickly, we even started hiring web designers rather than people who had already worked on presentations, which is rarely the case when you're looking to hire designers.
That's actually a question I had and something I'm interested in. When you have to make PowerPoints, there are a lot of things that go into a PowerPoint. There's a commercial aspect, a pure and simple communication aspect, and a design aspect. And I was wondering, if tomorrow I had to hire someone to make PowerPoints, what kind of person would I hire? Would it be more of a designer? Would it be more of a salesperson? Or someone who's really good at communication or storytelling? Someone who's good with content? And so how do you recruit for those aspects? What was the logic at the beginning, potentially? And what is it now?
I think at the beginning, we focused on a core business of specialists, which is really presentation design. So we said to ourselves, we want to deliver ultra high quality. We want to present ourselves as the best agency, making the most beautiful presentations. And for that, we need to hire designers with a great eye who are really excellent designers. And actually, in this line of work, just formatting presentations is really a lot about formatting information. So it's kind of similar to web or print in our line of work. And so we're just going to recruit the best designers. So we're going to pick those with the best portfolios and try to tell them, because at the time we were nobodies. So we say, hey, right now you're making websites. That's really cool. But actually, you're going to come make PowerPoints. And it doesn't sound that appealing at first glance, but it's going to be different. And maybe you'll get to work with clients you wouldn't have reached in web design thanks to presentations. So we try to recruit really great designers. That's really what it's about.
How do you judge the quality of a portfolio? Personally, I'm extremely bad at design. It's honestly my biggest weakness. I really don't have an eye for it. I'm incapable of telling what is beautiful or not. Well, I mean, I can say it, but only after the fact. I wouldn't be able to critique something in the moment. How do you judge the quality of a designer's portfolio when you're recruiting at the beginning? Like, you must have a good eye, I imagine. That's the basic next step.
It's true that the work starts with that, meaning training your eye. So keeping up with design trends every day, staying informed. What are the trends or what are the things that endure? Try to train your eye. So for me, ever since I started in this profession, at least for the past 12 years, every day I keep up with design trends. And there isn't a single day when I don't see something new. And then it's about practicing. And once you've trained your eye, maybe you'll be able to identify things, but it could be the beauty of a portfolio, the ability to replicate a design or an artistic direction. It could be about discipline. It could be about managing typography, spacing, that kind of thing. You notice it pretty quickly. In reality, when someone makes small design mistakes, you can spot it pretty quickly that when someone has maturity in design, if you have a well-trained eye. But in the end, it's a lot of rules. It's not just about taste.
Yeah, it's funny because there's taste and then there are all these rules. Like, here the typography is good, but there the typography is a bit too big, like the VSL we had before, etc. It's crazy because these really aren't things I can detect, or that I can, more and more I have the basics. I can just align my stuff, that's about it. And even then, that's elementary.
That's already good.
But one question I have is, in the beginning, since you were raised on the American SaaS model, I imagine you don't launch a SaaS because you don't have a budget, or because neither of you is a developer. One of you is good with his eyes and his hands, and the other is good at sales, so that makes a good duo. Is there a reason for that? That's the main reason, I imagine.
Listen, originally I do know how to code because I went to an engineering school for computer science. Yes.
That's true.
As far as I know, I think the company's initial plan was to go out and raise some capital funds. It was pretty complicated because you don't raise funds in a month, or if you do, it's a bit difficult. I think we wanted to get things done pretty quickly. Obviously, we also had to come up with the idea for the SaaS. And then the other point is asking ourselves, are we the best people to run this business? And I think at the time, that was something we were thinking about. I was passionate about design, so I knew I would be able to dive into that. My brother was very talented at talking to clients, to big accounts, and also at bringing in business. So it was a really good mix, a really good partnership, and that's it. And then there was also an opportunistic side to it. We could see that the market existed a little. We saw there was something to be done, thinking maybe we could do better than what was already out there. So we jumped in, and that allowed us to test and iterate very quickly rather than having to create a product, which can take time, raising funds, etc. Yeah.
Did you have a fast pace of action? I find that with a service, especially at the beginning, your speed is incredible. You can really move fast because you're on your own, just using your hands, and all you want is to help your clients, and they're coming in. Okay, it's fine. We'll do it right away. Don't worry. It'll get done. It'll be done well, etc. And it makes you want to move fast. Yes.
You can. It's a different business model, obviously, but it's also a model where you can learn a lot through experience. And if you love what you do in the service industry, you don't count your hours and you become an expert in a subject. That's what we appreciate.
Yes. Okay. That makes sense. The question is, initially, you didn't do it for those reasons. I know that all agency founders always end up having this thing of, my model isn't scalable anyway. Why wouldn't I launch a scalable model now that I have some cash, and create a product or a SaaS, so to speak, attached to the agency with the expertise you've gained there? Is that something you've thought about with Slidor?
Yes, we even thought at one point about making PowerPoint plugins, doing things like that. The reality is that my brother and I have always tried not to spread ourselves too thin. We told ourselves, let's try to stack up EBITDA as long as there's market depth. And if there's no more depth in France, we'll look for it internationally. And as long as we can grow, become even more relevant, and keep improving in our market, we'll continue to do so. After all, there are plenty of agency success stories where they've managed to launch products. It's just that for us, staying focused was very beneficial. And to tell ourselves, each time we'll bring in the best talent, we'll be able to attract the best, we'll get new clients, and we'll generate even greater satisfaction than before. And each time, we'll be able to keep this virtuous cycle going, to be the best agency in our field. And as long as we're growing and happy with what we're doing, we really have no reason to look elsewhere. There you go, being ultra specialized. It has always been very virtuous for us,
Okay, well, I really agree with that vision, actually. I find that most of the time, agencies that launch into tech aren't necessarily doing it for the right reasons or in the right way. It seems to me that most of the time, it's more about valuation issues, because actually you end up being half agency, half tech. And in fact, you'll be valued higher on multiples because you have tech. But the reality is the EBITDA actually comes from the agency in the end. So you see, that's the driving model.
And that's a good reason too. Honestly, once you've created, let's say, a little war chest that allows you to have some breathing room, in case you hit a rough patch, do you really want to put that at risk? Otherwise, the model is to say, I'm going to bring in investors who will take a stake in my company. But the reality is that once you are the sole owner of your company and your business is running well, you know that a lot of things will change once you've earned your freedom, so to speak, and your company is working. Do you really want to bring in investors just to launch a product? There you go. It happens. But in our case, we didn't want that. I think we were very happy with what we had built at that point and to keep going.
And on top of that, it's a different model. So actually, you have to relearn a business model. You spread yourself thin. And generally, that makes you lose momentum with the agency model, specifically with the service, because you have to divide your focus. I also think that's why it's not such a good idea. I didn't know you started Slidor with your brother. That's cool. It's stylish, like a family business, you could say. Thanks. How come your brother was such a good salesperson handling big accounts like that? Because for Slidor, we'll talk about it a bit later. But it's your type of client. There are not a million clients you can reach. It is basically big accounts and CAC 40 companies, right? Roughly speaking, how do you end up being good at being a big account salesperson? I feel like I don't know how you end up in that situation, you know? I'm interested because I'd like to become a good salesperson one day. Big accounts too.
Well, first of all, I don't know if we're really good big account salespeople, but in any case, we managed to convert them. And no, I think the reality is that when we started out, we immediately wanted to appear as being an established agency, a mature agency, a very professional agency. And so we tried to convey everything that was the codes perhaps of a very established agency, one that can speak to big accounts. So rather than claiming to be a small startup, some cool guys telling our life story on our website and saying, hello, we made 1,500 slides this year, that's great, etc. You see all those things that might seem kind of cool. Well, actually, we didn't want that. We didn't want to be a startup. We didn't want to be a cool company. We wanted to be a very serious company. And to tell those big clients, you can come to us. And so that's it. And I think we were very obsessed with that at the beginning. So when there was a call for tenders and we were competing, if we were up against big companies, Publicis, BETC, companies like that, while we were just 3 people in a hallway, well, we went for it and told ourselves we're really going to make them buy and we'll do everything we can to win. So it was a matter of attitude, first and foremost. And then knowing how to address these major clients, so understanding that sales cycles are different, negotiations are different, and trying to adapt your sales pitch accordingly. And their needs, so really taking an interest in their business. I think...
Okay. Thanks for making sure. That's interesting. I think that when it comes to attitude, that's really something I'm extremely bad at. I need to improve. Personally, I think that even when there are 40 of us, I'll still have the vibe of a company with just 3 people. On the other hand,
that can also be appealing.
Yeah, I agree.
For us, it suited us just fine. We didn't want to, we wanted to be serious. We wanted to be serious with those
people. Yeah, we wanted to be serious,
Yeah, we wanted to be serious. I think that's always been the personality of our agency, at least. It was about delivering, making promises, and being very serious about everything we promised. Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. That's nice to hear. As for client typology, we can talk about that a bit, specifically regarding the acquired and existing clients. You obviously cater to, you do premium, you're in a space where not everyone would pay 5,000 euros for a PowerPoint presentation. So basically, you have to target people who have money, generally the big companies, who are willing to pay significant amounts for attractive presentations. At this point, is it easy or difficult, to acquire clients in this kind of field? What are some of the challenges? I think the sales cycles are quite long, even though we're dealing with something that's pretty specific and operational, you see, because in the end, a presentation, PowerPoint, it's not a marketing strategy or something like that. We're still dealing with something that is quite basic, even though you inevitably have some influence over the content. And depending on what it is, there are things that are important. But yeah, is it difficult? What are the particularities of Algiers when it comes to this type of client?
So what's true is that, let's say, the big accounts are the ones that will make up our revenue. But there are still quite a few small companies, startups or SMEs that will still come to us with fairly spontaneous needs. And so your question is, what are the particularities of
acquisition? That's it for the big accounts part, if you like. Let's put it another way. How do you get your first clients? Through calls for tenders. You seem to mention that. And how does your acquisition side develop over time?
So at the beginning, we create the company. So we set it up in, 2 weeks. And we say to ourselves, well, we need to find clients. We have 3 or 4 months to live on our unemployment benefits and our debts. So But when you don't have any money, you get pretty creative at the start. And so we go with the first pretty obvious thing, which is I have a school network, let's say. So I'm going to send an email that I send to 40 years of alumni. So you're allowed one email like that. After that, you've used up your chance. And so, hello, we've launched our company. And at that point, there are people who have a taste for risk and agree to work with us, knowing that we don't have any clients. So I thank them. Our first client was L'Atelier des Chefs. It was Nicolas Bergerot, who was very nice at the time and agreed to work with us. And then you have to find delivery marketing. I had already made quite a few websites. I was making showcase websites, so I knew a bit about SEO back then, but nothing compared to today. And so I noticed that there was a search intent for PowerPoint agency where there's a little bit of volume. Well, it's between 50 and 100 per month in our French market. I think it might have been even less than that at the time. And it's the only keyword I identify, but I noticed that the existing competitors, 3 or 4 companies that have been around for a few years, actually don't really target it. They're more like agency websites where they talk about themselves, about the founders, their beliefs, things like that. So pretty quickly, I focus on this keyword. And in a short time, maybe a month and a half, we actually take the top spot for that keyword. And we're not even doing an amazing job. It's just that the competition isn't doing any work on it at all. So it works. And at that point, the phone starts ringing and we get way more requests than we can handle.
Then so immediately you reach first place and you have more requests than you can manage.
Yes, actually, it's extremely qualified traffic. There's a real need. So there's momentum in our business. We really arrived at the right time, I think, when there was demand. And I made a website, kind of like we were saying earlier, like a product site. Whereas agencies talk a lot about themselves, the founders, etc. I focus a lot on the brand. And actually, I show the portfolio instantly. So I tell myself, I want people to come to the site and think, oh, wow, that's beautiful. I want the same thing. And on top of that, it's relevant. People talk to me about pitch decks or sales presentations. And that's exactly what I need. So that's how it goes. So at the beginning, clients come from SEO and a bit of networking at first, which helps us. But very quickly, it's all about recommendations. So we work very, very hard for the first clients. We really try to deliver ultra high quality from the very first call all the way to delivery. So we try to rely on recommendations and on the fact that people will call us back or recommend us to others. And so today, 12 years later, in terms of new business, so let's say paid and organic channels represent about 40 to 45% of our revenue, and all the rest comes from recommendations or repeat business.
That's what I was going to ask you. You're in a field where naturally there's quite a bit of repeat business that can happen, isn't there? Is that a big part of the business or does it remain something minor? Do you generally have a customer who comes back? How many times do they tend to return? Once, twice, 3 times? Do they come back once every 3 years or every other time? What does it look like in terms of repeat business?
So it depends on the type of client. For example, large accounts will sign annual packages with us. So they call us whenever they have a need. And often large accounts will have, for example, recurring events. So maybe they have an event every 3 months or an annual event. They need to prepare their keynote. So we know they'll generally come back. They'll put us in competition, but they'll still come back. And then you have startups. So there you go. It depends on the pace of their fundraising rounds. So it might happen for everyone, every year and a half, every 2 years. And the more traditional companies, they have a sales presentation. Maybe they'll do it once a year, once every 2 years during a rebranding, that kind of thing. So it depends on the type of client, but small clients come back rarely and big clients come back more often.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's actually a question I wanted to ask you. What does the split look like in terms of what kind of presentations you tend to sell for whom, and proportionally? I get the sense that the 3 main things are the sales proposal that the salespeople use in the field, the pitch deck, in the case where you want to raise funds, because that's the PowerPoint that's going to make you the most money in your life, so you can pay Slidor to do it. And then there are internal presentations during seminars or things like that. That's what it looks like. Is it like a 33 split in terms of revenue or quantity? What does it look like?
So let's say that for us, from the start, we tried to focus on one type of service. And at first it was events because that's where it was the most spectacular. That's where you have big budgets. You pay, your event might be worth 20 million euros. So it's not unreasonable to say you'll spend 50,000 on your presentation. And so for now, that's what it's come back to. You also mentioned that during COVID, there were no more events. So at that time, we did pitch decks, but that's the product mix. Today, it's more about events as number one, internal communications as number two. Thank you. And then the rest, commercial presentations. Then pitch decks. Pitch decks are good, but of course they sell for less. These are projects where it's harder to be profitable because you have a lot of stakeholders. You'll see investment funds, fundraising platforms, entrepreneurs. There's a bit of stress in the middle of these projects, though. So in terms of project management, it's always a bit more intense. But they're also really great projects, very enjoyable, and they bring in big names. But overall, it's more about large-scale event clients, and we're really pushing in that area. And also, I think for all our designers, we have 23 designers at the agency today. On permanent contracts, they really enjoy these kinds of projects. It allows them to see their work on the big screen. And it's also quite rewarding because often at the end, someone from the audience comes up and asks, hey, who made your presentation? It's
so beautiful.
For my wedding, maybe.
Have you ever made a wedding presentation before?
We've done it for friends, but we haven't. It's much better at a wedding to have one nice and one ugly presentation that makes everyone laugh. There's going to be something really beautiful, so you shouldn't call us for that.
Have you ever tried making the ugliest PowerPoint possible?
No, we haven't had that luxury. We have occasionally received various PowerPoint presentations, which featured a very specific and distinct graphic style. But no, we haven't actually done that ourselves just yet.
So earlier I was telling you that fundraising presentations are, of course, very stressful. There's also the part where the funds haven't been raised yet, so we don't have the money yet. Have you ever set objectives like having a percentage of the fundraising or something like that? For example, if you manage to raise funds thanks to my presentation, should we get a bonus or something like that? Have you ever built or structured deals in a, let's say, more unconventional way like that with startups?
Good question. Often startups come to us with no money. They want a deck and offer to pay after raising funds. But a few times they didn't manage to raise anything. And in that case, you don't get paid. So it's complicated. So
every time they tell you, we'll pay you when we raise the funds, you know, it's really kind of condescending every time. But startups,
in seed, they'll raise a small round, maybe 200,000 or 300,000 euros. She says she has no money now, but paid for the spot, the raise. So you have to have a certain level of trust in the project. But otherwise, actually, the reality is that it's very complicated for us to know what impact we're going to have. So we never promise that to clients. It's true that prospects come to us saying, am I going to get ROI from my presentation? Possibly you'll get ROI because you won't spend the time you would have spent on it yourself. It can take you a lot of time. Now, I can't tell you if you're going to raise twice as much or if you'll get more responses from the funds because you sent a really great presentation. No doubt it will contribute, but I can't know exactly what impact we have. So we're going to sell something that's in the event space, that's very emotional, that's very impactful, but we can't quantify it. In any case, it would be a lie to try to put some scientific ROI on it, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because you're really at the border between, you know, there's a salesperson giving their pitch and you're just a presentation support. But on the other hand, you know, it's extremely important and that an ugly presentation support just won't perform. And on top of that, there's the fact that it's design, you see. It's always harder to quantify design, which is still something quite qualitative in terms of business impact, etc. So yeah, it's still pretty funny. It can't be easy to sell every day from an ROI perspective, right?
No, it's true that basically what we sell is time. We sell the time we're going to spend on the presentation, and that's really what it is. So for some companies, it might seem like a big budget, or for a specific need, that's it. But you have all sorts of companies. Large corporations might use our services to create a presentation for just one person within their company to help make a decision, just as you have others who will present it in front of several thousand people, especially at major conventions. You see, in that case, it can reach a very, very large audience, but we don't price it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, of course, often when you're providing a service, you price based on the time you spend on it. That's probably the healthiest model, I guess, with the premium depending on the client.
Exactly. But you also shouldn't be too rigid with your pricing. You have to experiment with your rates, and you also need to adapt to the market demand. For us, it's true that there were times when we had to turn clients away. We turned down 30 to 35% of the demand, and that lasted for 3 years. It was obviously an opportunity to raise our prices and position ourselves as an even more premium agency than before.
Because you didn't have the resources to take on more clients, is that right?
Yes, like in any service agency, you must experience that too. When you grow, what's hard is maintaining quality. We told ourselves that no matter which designer you get from us or who you end up working with, you should get exactly the same level of quality. And that we should be selling the brand rather than selling individual people within our agency. So that meant that we had to be extreme when it came to recruitment, really. So I'll share a sad statistic. At our company, a little less than 50% of designers pass their probation period. Well, that means two things. The first is that we don't recruit well. And the second is that we're very demanding. So there you go. But it's very hard to recruit. It has always been the bottleneck for us, the designers, more than the sales team. You managed
to hold back from taking today's money in order to anticipate tomorrow's money. That's admirable.
It's tough. And then during tough times when you feel like taking everything. Yes, of course, but we had a reputation to uphold, and disappointing a client who has been with us for a while is quite costly. Yeah.
And you're serious people. You were always serious. Seriousness above all else, right?
That is certainly true.
That's it. That's good. Those are the right decisions made by serious people. It's nice to see. This is really funny because every time we end up talking about presentations. So I had 3 or 4 questions about presentations specifically. Do you know which of your presentations was shown to the largest audience or not? Which of your presentations was presented to the most people? What was the audience size for your biggest presentation?
That's a good question. Well, maybe it was Paris's bid for the Olympic Games. Oh, yeah.
Impressive.
I'm not sure there was ever a presentation with a bigger audience that there was a presentation with more people. So yeah, that's what comes to mind. After that, maybe some thank you. Conventions, like an automotive brand, say Toyota, presenting its fleet of vehicles. It's going to be live streamed and so on. But still, the audience is smaller, even though there are a lot of people watching. But it's the big brands at major conventions that have presented so many things. A bit like Apple's or Google's keynotes and so on.
Is Apple's keynote kind of the holy grail of PowerPoint presentations? Would that be the ultimate project for you?
Well, actually, we do like it, of course. At some point in our lives as designers, we've all been inspired by Apple's design. But no, it's not about technical feats or spectacular achievements. It's just that it's very well executed and it's very beautiful. And the speakers, the products, everything is beautiful. And above all, the iconography is stunning. And Apple, they pay attention to detail. So that's really great. But personally, I also really like Samsung's keynotes. They're magnificent because there are other elements involved. There's really stage design that goes along with it, lighting effects, video elements, so motion graphics. Huawei also does some very beautiful things. We've seen the keynotes from Tesla and Hyperloop. It's a different style again, but we draw inspiration from everywhere. But no, there are brands that do really great work as well.
Okay, stylish. That's good to note. One question I had, what is it? Would you say you've had a presentation that was particularly strange or weird or just out of the ordinary? Let me give you an example of a client I once had, or rather a lead I had, who wasn't actually a client, but was a dentist who wanted to run for president. So he needed us to promote his website about his special program, etc. He wanted us to write text for him so he could be the best presidential candidate and so on. Well, it didn't work out because he was kind of the crazy guy on the bus.
He's not president.
Yeah. He's not president, even though he is. So there you go. I don't know if you also have any creations or presentations that could be a bit fun like that. What?
About something strange or weird to work on. We did a presentation on a social plan, so it's not a super fun topic, and it's not something where you're going to start doing a lot of animation. So you avoid
the number bouncing in like that.
So yeah, that could be it. We've had presentations where, for example, it's about a divorce. It's a presentation to convince the jury that we need to get more money from the husband, etc. It can be some rather unusual topics. And then you have to keep in mind that we have a little over 3,000 clients today. We've seen a lot of different topics They can be very appealing topics, or ultra industrial companies selling things we don't understand. It could be pharma, it could be research. We see all kinds of things and we don't understand everything. We try to understand, but we see a lot of things go by.
Okay, noted. And the last question I had about that was, do you know what's the biggest fundraising that's been done with your slides? The most money that's ever been raised?
That's pretty recent, being Mistral.
It was like this.
At the end of last year, it was around 1 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And so probably that's among the biggest fundraisings. We also did Sorare.
Yeah, that's right. I remember seeing that.
And what else did we do? We worked on Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, which was kind of a company based on Elon Musk's concept. And they were about to raise funds, a lot of funding from governments. So again, a big funding round. And yeah, I think those are the biggest ones we've done.
Not bad, not bad. Mistral. I have to admit, that's pretty impressive. For once, it's
nice. We were happy to have landed it. Yeah.
You could have taken a percentage directly from the company. Instead of charging fees,
you could have asked for 2 to 3%, but that wouldn't have worked.
Noted. So there's one point we haven't talked about, and I know we discussed it a bit before. You mainly make slides. I think you also work on Webflow and you build sites on Webflow. Actually, it's funny because you kind of come from web design and it was inspired by web design. I think the arrival of Webflow is something that's really done a lot of good for web design, globally speaking. It replaces WordPress, which was pretty ugly and hasn't evolved in 5 years. Personally, I love WordPress, but since there's been zero evolution, they're going to get replaced. Webflow comes along and allows people without graphic design skills to create beautiful things. When you see Webflow, with the arrival of Webflow, how do you see it? Why do you think, hey, this is going to be interesting? Maybe we could do web design on Webflow too.
Well, originally, I used to build websites by hand. So I was doing front-end development in Notepad at the very beginning. That was for Slidor's first website. That's what I did. And then Webflow came along, and I was really an early adopter because I was keeping up with a lot of trends in the US.
When did you start using Webflow? Because I don't even know when it first appeared. I only heard about it 2 years ago, but I was really late to the game.
In my opinion, it was about 8 years ago, something like that. I think it might be, that was really the very beginning. And the promise of Webflow at that time, by the way, wasn't really the same as today. It was, you're a designer and you can build websites. Actually, that's the promise of Framer today. But in the end, they actually shifted to being a company that targets more professionals than designers. So I see Webflow coming in and I think to myself, this is taking me a lot of time. The site, I'm the one maintaining it all by myself. Every
line of code, you're the one taking care of it.
That's it. So I'm on my editor. Every time something needs to be changed, it's a bit of a hassle. And so one day I redo the entire site on Webflow and I actually managed to recreate everything I could do. So I think it's a great tool, whereas before there were quite a few solutions, editors. But I always felt it was never the right approach because it never really generated actual code behind the scenes. In any case, it wasn't based on HTML semantics. So we remember, well, it still exists, but, Divi on WordPress, maybe it's better today. But 7 or 8 years ago, Divi was something else.
It's better today, but back then it was a nightmare. Honestly?
Yeah, you could spot sites made with Divi pretty quickly. And WordPress was the same. The WordPress admin was tough and so on. So I never really adopted it. I did a bit of WordPress here and there, but I found it time consuming, at least in terms of editing and maintaining a WordPress site. And again, it's better today, but back then it generated sites. Well, I just couldn't manage it. My sites were a bit slow. I had sites on frameworks that weren't very up to date. So Webflow. And so I completely adopted the product. So I started doing all my front-end work on it. And yes, we do build sites for our clients. We don't advertise it much because all our client acquisition is based on presentations. But still, we build, let's say, between 4 and 5 sites per month at the agency. To put that in perspective with, we handle between 100 and 150 projects at the same time in the agency on the presentation side. That
must be quite a challenge with the number of presentations, who does what, etc. Out of curiosity, how many people are on the BizDev side at the agency? Because I would say, for me, there's an ease in SEO that's linked to recurring business. And so actually, your clients, once you've brought in a client, they're here for a few months generally, and you don't have as many projects running live continuously with new business coming in all the time. How many of you are there on that side?
So right now there are 2 people, but for a very long time, that's right. There have always been 2 people in BizDev. The reality is when it comes to business, we don't really have business. In the agency, we mostly have account managers, people who respond to leads and convert or follow up with the current client portfolio. So there are 2 people. Actually, we tried to build an agency that's extremely lean in concept, meaning to have, you see, out of the 30 or so people we have, we'll have 1 or 2 project managers, the 2 of us. The founders, 2 people in account management, and the rest are all designers. So to put it in perspective with typical agency models, usually you have a few more project managers, a bit fewer people in production, or rather hybrid agencies that bring in freelancers. We chose a highly internalized model. So we never outsource anything. If we don't know how to do something, we simply don't do it. And we only hire people on permanent contracts, but that was mainly for quality reasons. So that's how we're organized. That's how it is. And of course, we're very well equipped to make sure everything runs smoothly. So regardless of whether it is
an internal management system that has to run like clockwork. Yeah.
It has to be very, very precise, because if you want to deliver quality, you have to commit to deadlines that you meet 100% of the time while delivering quality and ensuring project management is flawless. So that means it also has to be very responsive, so very available. And doing that with 2 people across 150 projects is complicated. So you actually need to, on one hand, give clients a lot of flexibility in how they contact you. Since you're offering a premium service, you can't tell them, yeah, for us, it's only Slack, or it's only through a ticket, or you can only call me between this time and that time. Actually, you can call whenever you want. At the same time, you need to have a sense of staffing, which is at a high level, if I may say so. So knowing how to put the very best people in the right place. So thinking that maybe if someone is particularly good at making crypto decks and someone else is better with luxury, you try to allocate resources accordingly. At the same time, you also have to satisfy the designers who want to change topics often and who say, you're nice, but honestly, I'm tired of working on luxury. I'm tired of white backgrounds and fancy typefaces. So there you go. And so you have to optimize your staffing so that you always have 100% of your people staffed in your company and there's no downtime. So there's that too.
It's funny when you say that, because when we look at ourselves, there are the clients, etc. How do you manage your clients? And then actually there's a huge importance placed on your employees, because as you said, your retention rate after the probation period, it's going to be 1 out of 2, because for each of the guys, you've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy to train them. These are guys who are important to you, whom you've worked with for a long time, and you don't want to lose them. And so when you think, I'd like to change things up a bit, you say to yourself, okay, how can we find a small project that will fit, that will be stimulating, test things out, something that doesn't have too much at stake, but also doesn't block everything else. And yet we have requests in crypto, so it would be better if they worked on crypto, but well, it's important for everyone. And that's where it starts too.
And then you have clients who are attached and say, no, I only want to work with this person. I don't want anyone else. And that's my designer. You don't let them go. So indeed, you have to be able to manage all of that. The people in project management are very talented. And indeed, managing that masterfully is very important.
Those in the project agency are the ones who allocate clients for this part, who act as a buffer between the designer and the business development team, and who will go and work in collaboration, I imagine, with the biz dev to determine which designer is the best fit and to find a bit of the designer's style, etc.
Yes, these are very cross-functional jobs. We often let our clients talk directly to the designer unless the designers don't really want to interact with the clients. But often, actually, it's not a bad thing to have. In fact, that's how we started. We didn't have a project manager for a very long time. You
really feel like a professional designer.
It's not a choice. So he would talk. And today it's a bit more nuanced. It depends on the clients, it depends on the projects, etc. And so project managers have that role. They are responsible for being available to clients and making sure the communication is of a high quality. So for every email we send, it has to be perfect. The exchanges need to be well executed. We need to be prepared. And at the same time, they put out all the fires that are either already there or about to start. So they have a lot of buckets of water to make it work. So it's a position that requires a lot of energy, obviously, and that often has you in the thick of things.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's not the easiest position among project managers.
No, it's tough. It's pretty demanding, yeah.
It's mainly that you just deal with problems all the time. It's like all day long, your job is, what's the biggest problem today that I'm going to have to handle? And you just work through the problems one by one. Well, for me, I feel like that's kind of how it is with me or my team leads. So you see, you have your list of problems and you go to the most urgent one to tackle it first. And you work through them a bit, mainly by saying, okay, so what's next? The priority and so on. And you often get more of the problem side than the, oh, thank you, it's nice to have a bit of project management support. But then
it depends. For us, we have clients, we have great relationships, really. It's nice to build relationships with them. And I think there's this part of the job that's actually very enjoyable, whether you're a designer or a project manager. Indeed, that's part of the job, where you have to set boundaries, invoice again, and try to move projects forward because they're at a standstill. You have to manage everything at the same time. And indeed, you need to have a very broad overview and a good memory.
It's true that especially when dealing with large accounts where the cycles are long and there are lots of stakeholders, usually these are situations where you inevitably get a bit bogged down quite easily. Not easy.
Yes, it's always about finding the right balance between setting boundaries and saying yes to the client. And that's a balance but you have to adapt. That's probably what it often comes down to. The secret, no matter who is in the agency, is that they have a very strong ability to adapt in the premium segment. In any case, adapting your pitch, adapting your deliverables, adapting things in general. To the context, that's what it means to be premium.
Between luxury and industry, the expectations aren't necessarily the same?
No.
Earlier, you said that you do acquisition and that you pay. That interests me because I find that there are very few agencies that work on acquisition with paid, or at least we don't really talk about it. Very often it's organic or content or things like that, because those are the tried and true models for that part. What do you do in paid? I'm curious to know a bit.
So actually, we just target the same keywords that we target organically. So really, it's pretty simple. It's just that the SERP for us is always taken up by sponsored results. That even if we're first on our keyword, we know that you're going to have quite a few results before ours. And so we're going to focus on our main shield, which is PowerPoint agency, which is almost the only one, the unique one in our niche market. And today we have a CPC of €8 on this keyword, which has increased over the years.
So you're not the only one bidding on it, right?
When you're a student who wants to redo your thesis, you're a bit annoyed that they clicked. But hey, that's life. And that's basically what we do in paid advertising. You should know that we have never had a strategy apart from that in paid. That's all we do. We've done a bit of advertising, YouTube, we've done 2 or 3 things like that, but it didn't work. Social ads in B2B for large accounts, it's the same story. So maybe it works for some people, but honestly, for us, we didn't see the point. And then we have a content strategy which is far from being as effective as yours, in the sense that we've really put the Slidor brand forward, etc. And so we've never done any personal branding, neither my brother nor I. First of all, because I think we're not very good at it. And also because actually it's a different era now. And when we started, there really wasn't all that, this whole personal branding thing, LinkedIn and everything. So we developed other tools for acquisition.
Okay. Yes, that's interesting. So you did your acquisition very much through SEO, very much through SEA, which are kind of faceless channels, where you go not exactly anonymously, but with the brand, really. That you described it well by saying that. These are things that are outside of yourself and all that, and which convey a company and brand message more than a personal message.
Yes, that's it. So obviously you have other goals with that, which are maybe one day you want to sell your company, you want to be dispensable, you don't want too much of a personal touch, or that people think, okay, if the founders aren't there, it doesn't work. There's all of that. And on the other hand, there are plenty of arguments. For personal branding, it's great to see founders sharing things. And I'm very receptive to the fact that I see experts like you on LinkedIn who say things that are really relevant. I think, okay, he knows what he's talking about. I want to work with him.
It's true that it's cool for that. But in fact, for me, since I'm in acquisition, if I go on vacation, it goes on vacation with me, unfortunately. It's a bit more technical, let's say.
The work you are doing is extremely competitive in this field. Yes, it certainly is.
That's what I'm discovering little by little. But hey, listen, the advantage is that I enjoy it. That's the most important thing, I guess. As long as you enjoy what you do, things usually fall into place. I
Agree. If it's genuine, it works so much better right away.
Yes, it requires so much less effort from you. That's the most important thing. One last question I wanted to ask you. It's a bit more personal. The 3 golden rules of customer relations. For me, that's something I'll leave with you. I'm going to ramble on for a couple of minutes. That way it gives you some time to think about it a bit. But basically, I really struggled with this at first, quite simply because I don't come from a customer relations background. I hadn't had any clients before, historically speaking. And so by starting an agency, I had to discover that actually, yes, beyond performing well at what you do and delivering a good product or service, you also have to be good at customer relations. That means good reporting, good communication, professionalism, being on time, and so on. So for you, what are the 3 golden rules of client relations? What would you say are the 3 things people do wrong, or the 3 things you absolutely have to nail, that you have to be good at to ensure good client relations?
The first thing that comes to mind is to do what you say you're going to do. So you shouldn't overpromise. And so often we tend to want to do that in sales pitches. All that, we say yes to everything. No problem, don't worry. But really, our golden rule is we have deadlines and we stick to them. No matter what happens, really, there are no missed deadlines, etc. Indeed, after that, we promise things we're actually able to deliver. Next, there's rigor, but in the broadest sense. For us, indeed, we'll be on time for calls always, and we'll maintain rigor in our communication. We'll write very polished emails. We'll take the time to craft our writing. We'll try to offer a consistent experience at every touch point of the agency, to be rigorous everywhere. We'll make sure our designers have good microphones and good webcams. We'll make sure that there is never a mistake in our emails, absolutely never a mistake in any email we send. And we'll be rigorous with our deliverables as well. So we'll carry out a thorough quality check. But well, that's kind of part of it. It's not really about client relations, but still, it's part of the experience. So it still matters. Actually, we tell ourselves at every touch point, they offer me the same level of quality. So that's great. And that's really important. So we have to try to spread that throughout the agency as best we can. There you go. And then I think that so for my business, at least, setting boundaries with clients is quite important, and they actually ask for it. I think the initial instinct is to say, we're going to do everything, we're going to please our client. But in many situations, what they're really asking us is, listen, bother me as little as possible, but guide me and deliver. And actually, very often we take an approach or say things like, look, don't worry, we really know what we're doing, actually. Everything we do is in your best interest. So just trust us, and you'll see that, like others, you won't be disappointed in the end if you let us do our work. So we're not necessarily into over-communicating. We're more about delivering. We want to create a wow effect every time we deliver something. But on the other hand, we're available. So clients have complete freedom, even to come to our offices, to come by in the evening to see if we're working. We're available. And then maybe in terms of client relations, there are a few rules in the agency. When we receive a lead, we have 15 minutes max to call them back. But usually it's more like 5 minutes or even 1 minute. But that's very important. It immediately sends a strong image, an image of responsiveness, an image of actually we get back to you very quickly. And I think that in all service professions, it's always a bit annoying to reply to emails too late, or to have to wait thinking, okay, the pace the agency sets for me is basically they'll get back to me tomorrow. I send an email, they reply the next day, or I call them, they're not available, or something like that. And all of that can create a bit of frustration. Obviously, you have to manage your own organization behind the scenes, because it's hard to say that you're always available. But as much as possible, offering a high level of responsiveness is really beneficial for your client relationship, I think.
Okay, damn, that's really interesting. What's impressive is that it's actually, what fascinates me about this model is that it's the opposite of mine, but I'm close to an opposite model in the sense that I over-communicate a lot. I push my guys to over-communicate by telling them, even if the client hasn't replied, if you've worked an hour on the client, you shoot them an email to tell them what was done, what has progressed, even if it's not done well, even if the formatting or the form isn't right, etc. To really be on the side of over-communicating and having those aspects. I'm not very good at formatting, that's true, but it's inspiring, it's interesting, especially when it comes to responsiveness and all that. Take microphones, for example. We're on remote calls all day, so we need good mics. It's essential. It's funny you mentioned that, as they really make a difference. Echo. In any case,
I think you're right, to do what you're doing. And I think it's also a bit dependent on our business or on our personalities too. So you see, I would never, if someone over communicates and sends me emails, I'm totally fine with them doing that, actually. So you're right. You're the one who's right in that case, you see.
I think it really depends on who you're talking to. I think your type of client and mine are probably opposites. They don't really like
being disturbed too much. Or sometimes it's just a side issue for them. You have entrepreneurs, they want to know what's going on, maybe.
Every day, they want to know where their money is going and how things are going. Is it growing? Is it not growing? And how do we untangle all of that? But yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be a good topic, inspiring. I think I'll listen to this whole part again just to see what I can apply on my end. Because if I manage to have both over communication and your rigor, that would be excellent. That would really be
both of those.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much, Jérôme. For this whole discussion, I'll let you have the final word. It was really a pleasure to talk with you. Lots of interesting insights about how a PowerPoint agency / design agency works. Because it's a model, I know one that's similar to mine while being extremely different. So it's quite interesting for me to see all this. And with that, I'll let you have the final word.
Thank you. It was truly a pleasure. Maybe for the final word, this is for you, Leo, because you don't promote yourself. But all this to say that as someone who did SEO for a very long time and made sure to have a good level, I was very happy for the first time to call on someone like Leo, who brought me a lot of things I hadn't seen before. So there you go. If tomorrow you have a need, don't hesitate to go through Leo, because he's really good. And I want to make it clear that Leo didn't pay me to say this. I'm saying it with great pleasure.
Thank you very much. It really means a lot. Well, with that, I wish you all a great day on YouTube, which is going well. See you later.
Hi, everyone.